Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Minnetrista City Council meeting for the work session for February 7th, 2022. I'm going to do the roll call. This evening we have with us city staff is our city clerk, Don Motzko, our city engineer, Allison Fauski. We have our lieutenant sitting in for our chief, Lieutenant Squires. And then we have Sarah Sensalo with Kennedy and Graven, our attorney. We have Ali Palfus, who is our Director of Administration, and then David Abel, who is our Director of Community Development Director. And then council present, I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the mayor. Council members present are Pam Mortensen, John Chumperlin, and McGregor, and Kathleen Refkin. Thank you. With that, we only have two items on our agenda. We have the Wood Edge Road CUP discussion, and then we have the proposed ordinance revisions for soil, sod, and irrigation. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, I believe.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, before you tonight is a conditional use permit violation issue related to 6605 Wood Edge Road. Back in 2008, the city issued a CUP, that's a conditional use permit for that property. It's owned by Larry and Wendy Wittig. The CUP allows for boat repairs to be conducted on the property as a home occupation. The CUP is currently in effect, and it has 15 conditions, and those are in your packet in the attached letter. If you review the letter, you can see there have been violations of the conditions of the CUP recently and throughout the past several years. The ones that were violated are bolded in the letter. The property owners also have not constructed the accessory structure that was required by the CUP to be constructed within 3 years of the date of the city council resolution that approved the CUP. So the deadline would have been August 18, 2011. That's also a violation of one of the conditions of the CUP. The city staff did send that letter to Mr. and Mrs. Wittig. The city did not receive a response other than a phone call from the Wittig's attorney inquiring as to when the city council would be considering this matter. City staff is now bringing this issue to the council for its consideration and for the council to provide direction as to how to address the violations of the conditions of the CUP. Because there have been clear violations of the conditions of the CUP, the council does have a legal basis to revoke the CUP. Per the city code, the council would need to consider the revocation after holding a public hearing, which would be scheduled for a future council meeting. If the council would like to give the property owners additional time to bring the property into compliance, that's an option as well. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're not going to make any final decision here. This is a work session, but we can have a discussion, give staff direction where we want to go. The applicants are here if you have questions of them. So first we'll start out. Do you have questions of Sarah?
I do.
Okay.
Have one right now.
Yeah.
1 and 3 of the conditions are being listed as violated. Is one, if the accessory structure had been built, does one go away? Because I read 3 as saying once the building is built, then you wouldn't have up to 12 sitting outside. I get the inference that those 12 that were given as a limit would be inside the structure. So is that a correct interpretation?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, condition 1 does say, the maximum number of vehicles associated with the home occupation is 12. I suppose if they're parked inside the building, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, it's
Okay.
12. So
whether they're outside or inside?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's my reading of it.
Okay.
I guess I would ask, do we know why there wasn't the accessory structure not built?
That would be a question of the applicant, I suppose.
Yeah, I just want to hear from you.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you.
All right. You want to come forward? We may have some questions for you.
Sure.
You'll have to state your name and address for the record, please. I assume you're the attorney representing your client?
That's correct.
Thank
Yes.
you.
It's John Waldron, 1951 Concordia Street, Wayzata, Minnesota. Actually, City of Warren. So I would like to address the questions and give a brief background first, and of course, Mr. Wittig can respond to some details as well and fill in some of that. So initially, this is a little bit odd. It's a very good question. Why wasn't the building ever built? Actually, Mr. Wittig, and he can confirm this, when the CUP was first granted in in 2008, he actually wasn't even aware that there was a requirement of a building to be built. Seems a little hard to understand.
I was on the council at the time, and it was quite clear.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, but yeah, go
In any
ahead.
event, that's his recollection. He had no idea. He says, and so the first, some of these violations that took place in the past, I think 2011, 2013, he wasn't aware of either. Now, he may have been sent letters, but he didn't receive any such letters. So actually, the very first time he was aware there was a problem was last fall in November. And he got a telephone call from an officer, Minnetrista City police officer, said, we got a complaint about your property. And moreover, you didn't put up the building. And his response was, what building is that? Well, then it was explained to him, well, look, your CUP says you have to put up a building, and it's overdue. And so that's the first time he saw that there was a problem. Now, there's only about 3 weeks in the year when the property, the things on the property are really visible to neighboring owners. And I assume that part of the rationale for restrictions that are put on, as it was done here with the CUP, is because of the visual issue. And people, I assume, complain because, hey, I see a lot of cars parked here. I think that's a violation, and so it's checked out, and that's what happened last November. But there's only about 3 weeks of the year when there's really visibility of much of anything because of the dense tree cover on the property. Now, one thing that, now that Mr. Wittig's been advised you do have to have a building there that's overdue, now he's begun the process of checking that out. What can I put up there? How big? How much will it cost? And so on and so forth. He's got blueprints that he can show the council this evening to show that he's on the road to doing that. So in fact, yes, we would request that Mr. Wittig have more time to become in compliance. And to Mr. Schemperlin's point, we anticipate that once the building is up, that the complaints about vehicles or exceeding the limits are probably not going to happen because there's going to be a lot of room in the building. Now, the other thing, though, that's a challenge for Mr. Wittig's business, I think it's important to understand, is how it works. And so, of course, it's a boat storage, boat repair business. And so, as you know, there's 2 crunch times of the year. In the spring, people want to get their boats in now, as soon as the ice is out. Let's get our boat in. Let's get it summarized if necessary, get it in. Mr. Wittig has off-site storage where he stores boats. So there's only really 2 times of the year when there's a lot of activity on the property. And of course, that's the spring and the fall. And so the challenge with this business is that people will just drop their boats off there, and you can try to cabin that in, to try to schedule things like, well, let's see, can you bring it over next Thursday at 5:00? I'm sure I can do that. And then something comes up. Well, they don't show up. What happened? Well, something came up. I couldn't bring it then, or they don't even notify them. They'll just drop it, and suddenly it's there. And I think that's what happened. He can explain. Last November, there was a boat with a trailer there that it was just dropped and couldn't be moved, and the owner had taken off to Arizona. So those things happen. And as we know, for those of us who are business owners, we have to accommodate our customers, our clients. There's only a certain amount that we can control with regard to. Let's be very specific. Don't bring it over unless it's this time frame, and if you drop it off, then we'll have to have it hauled away or something because we can't be in violation of our CUP. And so So those are the challenges that I think it's important that the council understands. So as best, Mr. Wittig does the best he can to try to, because he knows there's a limit. So to make sure that he doesn't go over that limit. But during these two crunch times a year, about 6 weeks in the spring, about 6 weeks in the fall, there's more likely to
Right,
be.
we understand. I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
If you could hold on just a second while we're kind of on the same vein. David, when somebody gets a CUP, are they just verbally told that they've been granted? What kind of communication does the city have with the recipient of that CUP? I think that's important.
Yeah, well, generally speaking, a conditional use permit is a land use application that an applicant will need to submit, come to the city, submit, and request a conditional use permit. So they'll submit the land use application, we'll take it to our planning commission, where they'll hold a public hearing on the matter. We provide the notice to 500 feet from the property to hold that public hearing. Planning Commission then takes that recommendation and we give that to you as a council and we go through and either approve or deny that CUP with conditions. This one was a little bit different in the sense that he didn't come in actively seeking a conditional use permit. He was operating his business without that special permit that he needs to operate that business, and it was actually via complaints that it was brought forward. So a complaint was made. He was made aware of that, told what he would need to do to go through that process. So then back up to what I just said, that's how that initiated the process and how we went through that. And generally speaking, when you come up with conditions on a conditional use permit, it's largely based off of the public hearing, public input and things as to how that business is being operated. And so I wasn't specifically here when this was approved, but very shortly thereafter I was here. And so I suspect, like other conditional use permits, that's where the conditions would have came from based on a lot of the feedback and comments that were made at the time.
And is a letter sent to the applicant with those conditions in that? How are they notified of the conditions?
Yeah. It depends, in terms of how the communication's going, and usually they're recorded to the title of the property. But yes, general practice after a conditional use permit, the resolution is approved. One goes in the property file, one goes to the property owner, one gets recorded to the title of the property because the conditional use permit does run with the property, not the person. So that would be the follow-up to that, correct?
Okay. And then, Craig, could you tell us, when a complaint comes in, is the property owner notified that a complaint has come in, or do you not talk to, how does that work?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, we do contact the homeowner and advise them and generally take a statement from them. Oftentimes we'll actually go to the property as well and ask if we can be allowed on it.
Okay, so when this complaint came in 2021, you visited the property or somehow contacted the property owner in some manner, and the previous ones as well?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that's important for us to know because then the other thing is, you said he does have off-site storage?
Correct.
Okay, so where is that?
Watertown.
In Watertown, okay. All right. So I was on the council when the CUP was approved. So, yeah, just so you know.
Sure.
All right.
And I guess just I'll add too, the violation in 12/2 of 2013, I was on the site with CSO Carlson, looking at counting boats, looking at boats, and we talked about the building as well.
Okay. So he's been aware of that since 2013.
Oh, okay. That's interesting information, but I'm just telling you what Mr. Wittig has relayed to me, that the requirement of the building came as a surprise to him in November. So he's forgotten. I don't know what was going on, but there was a period of time when about the time when the deadline for the the building to be constructed, his house burned down, unfortunately, so he was in a bad way, mentally, emotionally, so whatever happened at that point, he probably wouldn't have retained.
Sure, I understand. We were not aware of that. The house was a complete loss?
I think so.
On the house that you were, this is, okay, so this is the house that you lived in?
Yes,
Okay, and this is, you rebuilt it since then?
yes.
Okay. It does put a little different spin on things,
What
but,
year was
but
that?
still.
Pardon?
What year?
2011.
Okay, so that was 11 years ago. All right. So since then,
With matches.
pardon?
I started playing with matches.
Well, that's not good.
No.
All right. All right. Counsel, any other questions of the applicant or his attorney or staff?
You said that Mr. Whittick has blueprints,
Correct.
and how soon could he get the building created?
That's a very good question. I don't think we have that answer right now. I would like to have, well, he's going to have the spring crunch coming up, but I think I would like to see him have like 90 days at least to finish exploring what the cost is going to be. We have an approximate idea, but he needs to get some bids, of course, and look at financing and so on. Fortunately, we're still in a low interest rate environment for the time being, but he would like to put up a building.
Am I allowed to ask Mr. Whittick directly? Mr. Whittick, are you very definitely, is this a reality? Are you really going to build a building?
Yes, ma'am.
Here's what I might want to suggest. 90 days to get a bid is a bit much, but 30 days is fine. I'd like to have you send staff a report as to when you're going to be building a building. There really is no excuse for this. I'm going to be real blunt here. I was here when this was given. The neighbors were concerned about the number of boats that were going to be here. That's why it was limited to 12. That's why we said build a building. There was no mistake about that. Since then, it's been reiterated, so there is knowledge that a building was needed to be done. Get this bid, talk to staff, say this is when we can build this building, and you are going to be held to that. That's my opinion. The biggest concern of the neighbors was the number of boats. You have off-site storage, so for you to say that, well, we don't have control over that. Yes, you do. You can take your vehicle and you can move those boats to your off-site storage area. You don't have to have more than 12 there. If that's going to be a problem, then you need to think about a different location. This is a residential neighborhood. It is not for commercial use. That's where I'm coming from. I think this building needs to be built no later, up and built and finished no later than June, because the building season is usually April, May, June. And if you get bids now and you get on their docket, if that can't be, we need to know why. Comments?
My comment is, I think that is being very generous. I think the neighbors have been more than patient. There was clearly a CUP with very clear direction. If he didn't get the letters, hard to believe, but he did get 4 visits, noticed and talked to the police officer and David and other people also. I think even having the issue with the boats being unmovable, whatever, you've had 14 years as a business owner to work that out. So I'm thinking that suggestion is overly generous, and I would say that they've had plenty of time and the CUP should be revoked.
Okay. John?
Agreed. I just,
With who?
with both. This has been long enough. I think I find it hard to believe that somewhere along the line, that there was that big a break in communications that wasn't aware that this building had to be built. The other thing I would add is that let's be sure when the building is built, that it is in such a size that it will accommodate the boats, the trailers, et cetera, that are noted already in the cup.
Well, in the CUP, it calls for boat repairs. It doesn't call for storage, correct? So, I mean, if you're keeping them there for 6 weeks in the beginning of the season and 6 weeks at the end, pending people are bringing them in that.
No, that's not the case. That's just for transit. We don't store boats there.
Well,
It's
he
not
said for a
storage.
period of 6 weeks at the beginning and
I
6.
store them offsite.
How
Bring
long-
them there, do the quick service, in the water, they go the same day. Then we turn around and go get another batch. Bring them in, clean them up, take them to the lake. They don't stay there any length of time. They're just in transit.
So why do you have an issue with 12, more than 12?
I mean, the Google.
Because the average customer around the lake, oh, I got a problem with my boat. Well, they bring additional work to me where all my 150 boats are out stored someplace else. It's a different base of customers. I have the customers that I store that are outside. I have the base of customers that are around the lake that need service work done. They just, out of the blue, all come in and there be boats in my yard.
Well, you'll have to
They'll
figure,
drop 'em off.
yeah, you'll have to figure that out
Yeah.
because that's,
Do you do your service work then inside another building, or you do the work outside?
I do the work outside.
Well, this will be a plus. You could do the work inside.
Bonus.
Kathleen.
I agree with both of you. I think I agree with Pam more. I mean, this has been going on a long time, and I just pulled up Google, and
I
I could
have
see
no
24
clue.
boats in the Google photo.
I had no clue that I had to put up the building because I came to the meeting ahead of time. And I said, well, what about the possibility of putting up a building before the meeting even started? And the guy shut me down and said, no, don't even bring up a building. Don't even discuss it. And then I would get up here and we talk about it. And the first thing is, what about a building? Well, it would be nice. But
All right.
I was never told that I needed to put one up.
So
I was
David,
told that.
when David talked to you, he,
No, we never talked about, I never talked to anybody about the business off a different time frame. Only at this meeting.
well, the bottom line is, it's on paper. Bottom
I
line is,
understand that,
it's
but
part of the
I saw
CUP.
the paperwork for the first time in November. So I was shocked when you were saying, do you have the building up?
So, council,
Okay, all right. I'm new. And I'm usually the mean one.
you're not.
But tonight, I'm going to ask you specifically, are you able to build a building? Are you actually able to do that? Or is this not really possible?
No, we're able. We just have to put the numbers together and so on. So I have a better idea of what to put up for a building.
Okay. I know next to nothing about building, but we did build our house. I know that we have road restrictions and things here until May.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to give you an extra month or two. But you have to stay in touch
Oh, I
the
understand.
whole time.
Yeah.
And at the end of whatever time we
So
decide
when you
you
say
have to
in
have the
touch-
building.
In touch with who?
Staff,
Right.
David Abel
David
is,
Abel.
is the contacting person. And so, for instance, I'll just give you a little, they're not going to be building a house. It's going to be probably a pole shed, which can go up fairly quickly,
Okay.
just so you know.
They
Yeah.
said 3 to 4 weeks.
Right.
Okay. Well,
Right.
then do you agree
or
with the,
Something like that.
do you agree with the mayor that it could be done by the end of June?
No. They said that they could start it at the end of August,
Who is
No.
they?
the contractor.
So you've gotten bids.
I just got one.
Okay, so first you tell us that it's going to take you 90 days to get bids and figure out the finances, and now you tell us you already have a bid and it can't go up until August.
No, that's not correct. I
Okay.
asked for 90 days.
Okay, to get the bids and to get financing. You did say get bids. You did say that,
I said 90 days. We would like 90 days.
to get bids.
For the whole thing.
Okay, 90 days for the whole thing.
Right.
Okay.
For the whole thing is in getting it built?
Well,
No, just to get
Okay,
bids and
we're
get
trying to get
financing.
down to what's reasonable and what's gonna happen. But it can't start in August because I can see what's gonna happen. We're gonna be here in November and we'll be exactly where we are today. So it has to start sooner, like April or May.
Well, I agree with Lisa. You have 30 days to get bids. You send them to David, and then it has to be built by June.
But the contractor,
You can get additional bids from multiple contractors and see if someone else can get it done sooner. You're not tied to the one who can't do it until August. It's not fair to the neighbors to hope that you start in August, because that's another boating season of seeing multiple boats in your yard, and they shouldn't have to do that after all these years.
understood. So
So we are going to move this along. So I think I'm hearing the council say, we're going to be generous here, and we're going to allow you till the end of June to get a building built. In the meantime, you will be in contact with David Abel, our staff, and you will let him know what your schedule is and so on if things change, and you will show him the bids so that he knows that this is all on the up and up and it's all honest, because quite frankly, we're getting a lot of different stories here. And so the building will be built by the end of June. You will be in contact with David, and if not, this is going to come back here and we will pull the CUP. Okay?
understood.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to our next one. This is our proposed ordinance revisions for the soil, sod, and irrigation. Good job.
Madam Mayor, members of council. So at the later end of 2021, the council directed staff to take a look at some ordinance updates. And since given that direction, there were a few items that we felt best to come back to the council and have a discussion and get some feedback, just so that we can move forward with the proposed ordinance changes with some clear directions. So the first item is soil preservation, grading, and seeding. And my apologies, the correct section of the city code is 500.23, not 200.23. In this section of the ordinance, it's this portion that states that there's 6 inches of soil placed over a building lot after a home has been constructed. The challenge with the current ordinance is that the term soil does not indicate any kind of organic matter that can support the growth of sod or seed. And this presents a challenge. There's certainly specifications, MnDOT specifications on topsoil that we could specify. However, as we've talked before in the past, that would require either some testing or getting a haul ticket. Haul tickets are not always given out in this situation. It's actually more of an anomaly than it is the common practice. So staff also went and took a look at some other definitions from some other communities for topsoil, which are included in your packet. And so, as well as some other definitions from websites and so on. So at this point, I was looking to see if there was a particular definition that the council would like to pursue. We looked at the City of Plymouth's definition, or the other definition, item F, as ones that we felt were had some good components to topsoil definition that would be enforceable. So,
Okay. And you're recommending possibly City of Plymouth's definition. I have one revision. I think it should say, besides surface soils containing higher concentrations of organic matter where particles do not exceed 1 inch in diameter, we should also add, and free of heavy clay.
And stones.
Good one. Anybody have comments on that?
I agree with that.
The other thing I'm wondering, can we, or do we have to say that it can't be compacted. In other words, we don't want them to put down the 6 inches and then drive over it with heavy equipment and then it becomes compacted, because that's also an issue.
That's a good point. I can certainly look at, I didn't come across that in any of the research, but that certainly I could ask and reach out on it as far as compaction, limiting compaction.
It's just something so that, because that really prevents
Yeah.
moisture from going through. So are we okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, all right. And then we're talking about grading and sod installation?
Yes, so the next item,
Can I make one comment on this
Yeah.
first? I think under the certificate occupancy, it shouldn't say just soil, it should say topsoil.
Okay,
And
good.
then in the definitions on 500.03, we should define what that topsoil is, which is what we've talked about here.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
yes,
Good one.
thank you for the
Uh-huh.
clarification.
Good.
Okay, so we'll proceed with that direction. So we'll add definition. And then the other component to that was looking at something similar to what's currently being done with getting a landscape escrow, that the city's fee schedule be revised to include a final grade escrow as well, if that's something the council would be comfortable seeing moving forward. Just so that there's a financial component that's tied to the building permit. There's a practice already in place for that, for a similar escrow, that we could piggyback on that and do the topsoil requirement as well.
Okay.
And in past practice, another community that I worked in, I think, there's certainly a question of will the escrow cover the cost? That would certainly be the idea. Past practice in another community, there was an instance where they did take that escrow and use that money to get the topsoil and get the grade out there. But it's certainly the exception and not what typically happens in practice. Once you have that money, you want to make it an amount that is significant enough that they're not just going to walk away from that, but not too onerous so that it's a financial hardship for the applicant. So
Why wouldn't you just roll that into the escrow? So you're saying a separate escrow for landscaping? Don't we have that already?
Right now, we have an escrow for a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, I see. So this would be.
This would be something separate
Yeah, okay.
than that.
Mhm.
We've always, as we've talked about before, we get a little leery when we're talking about certificate of occupancies and how that's very specific to building code.
Okay.
And so you get kind of into a gray area if you start tying COs to something that's not related to building code, like grading and sod and those sorts of things. That's outside of the realm of the Minnesota State Building Code. So certainly
Yeah.
it would make more sense to go down that path. But as Allison said, I mean, the idea though, I mean, is it's got to be significant enough that people don't want to walk away from it because the actual practice of it is it's not the point that we're going to go in and start doing these sorts of things. And the other, and what this should be looked at good or bad, because this could then move people along to get into their homes sooner, but now you're going to have people probably living there without a finished grade or sod. So that CO and that escrow is probably speeding that process up a little bit, and helping. And so that's something we'll have to maybe talk about and think about in terms of the amount. Maybe we make the amount a little more to incentivize people to do that and get that final grade done and or get the sod down type thing. But certainly in terms of actually enforcing something, I think Sarah would concur. I know Ron and Sarah and I have had discussions about that before, about tying COs to grading and those sorts of things. And that's just
Okay,
not,
so it'd be a separate.
it'd be separate, correct?
Okay. I see heads nodding. This is just also just direction at this point. It'll come back to us for final review and approval, so, and I think it has to go to the planning commission.
Correct, it's
So
chapter
it'll also
5, so
go-
we would hold a.
Yeah.
So we didn't know, back when we first talked about this, we didn't know if we would check back in with council or if we just go right to the public hearing with planning commission, and we wanted to check back in, make sure we're heading down the right
Yeah.
path before we
Yeah.
get too far and with the planning commission and such, and drill some of this down a little tighter.
Any ideas, thought, having been done at this stage, as to how you would arrive at that dollar amount? A standard or square footage or?
We've talked about this a lot over the years, and I think we're probably going to have to come up with a square footage. We have such drastic differences with our lots and lot sizes that, to be fair, just to have to be fair to everyone, I think we're going to have to come up with a price per square foot
Yeah.
that's reasonable, and then apply that when it's in for permit. Because in some cases, these bigger lots too, they're not landscaping the whole lot. There's just so much around the home, and so you can't just take the lot size and do your math. So we'll have to look at that, and that won't be all that difficult either. But I think likely it's going to have to come down to a price per square foot.
Okay.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. The next item for ordinance updates was grading and sod installation. And this one, I was fairly clear on council direction, but I figured since I was bringing this back for a work session, I would just share with the council what the recommendation would be for the installation dates. And our recommendation would be to follow MnDOT specifications for seed and sod. That way, it's a tried and true method. We also included in there some language that you would not be able to seed or sod if there is a watering ban in place.
Absolutely. My only question here is, okay, so you have lawn seed can be seeded April 1 through June 1, and in the fall, the seed will be sown between July 20th. Why did you change it from August 15th to July 20th?
So that's consistent with MnDOT specifications, but it can remain August 15th if that's a council preference.
I think it should be at least August 15th. Seed you can put down later in the year. In fact, you can put it down as late as September. And that's the other thing I was saying. Why do we want it? Why do we even care if there's an end date?
Okay.
I mean, if they want to put seed down in October, that's up to them. But if it doesn't take, they're going to be doing it again.
Certainly. If that's the council's direction.
Well, but if a builder's doing it, they'll be like, well, we put it down, it's fine. They get their escrow back. Now the homeowner has no yard in, March because they put it down so late.
It could be. I mean,
That's good.
I mean, when we moved in mid-October, that was our biggest concern of whether or not the sod that they put down 3 days before was going to be any good next year. So
Right,
I
right.
can see why we might want to have an end date for those cases because the builder got their escrow back and the homeowner could be left with nothing. If they put it down beginning of November and it snows shortly thereafter.
That's a good point.
Yeah, okay.
Because they've tried,
Yeah.
as you know, with the issues that are occurring, they'll point to that.
Yeah.
Somehow.
okay.
Come back,
Oh,
so.
right, yeah,
I mean,
okay.
in terms of do we care, I understand that completely, but maybe just more of a covering ourselves. It might be better to have something as to what is being suggested because
Yeah.
they'll use that.
Okay.
I do agree with the August 15th versus July, because July's still
It's still
in the
pretty
heat of the
hot.
It'd be
summer.
smoking hot,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad
And
we
then
got
I
that.
only have a couple other questions. Do we want to require for seeding that they also have to cover it with a straw mat? That helps a lot in terms of erosion, and it also helps for water retention when you're talking seeding.
It certainly does. We could. Usually, there's with residents. There's with their desire to have a lawn, they're more apt to put on the adequate irrigation on top of it. We could put it in as a requirement, or we could say recommendation.
Recommendation, maybe at least.
If you would like to soften it, and then that way, it's not something that's
Okay.
that we're requiring, but we've made it noted that, you might have a better product if you put a mulch or a blanket over top.
Okay. All right.
Did we want to put where it says sod shall not be placed during a water ban, like unless specifically approved by city with a special permit? Do we want to leave like a little bit of out in case?
See, that was our problem this
Well,
year.
I'm saying like once, the Woodland Cove is done in that, if you have one random house that is getting sod, 5 years down the road and there's no, yes, we have a ban, but I mean, you might want to leave room for a little bit of wiggle room at some point in the future.
Well, and to the point what we talked about before with, we had completely the opposite situation in Red Oak, where it was very, very, very wet.
Yeah.
There was obviously we never even thought of a watering ban in our, it was
Right.
never in our future. And the issue there was that the developer was dragging their feet and not getting sod down when they could all year long. June, July, it would have been completely fine to do, and they weren't getting it down. So like a good point in terms of, leaving something open. How we do that exactly, language-wise, we'd have to work on, but we have been in the opposite situation.
Right.
I'm just saying,
yeah.
because once the big developments are done, like random homes may want one, and to say no, even though,
Well, we could have
be
some-
extreme not to have no wiggle room. What if the city needs a whole new yard or something? Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think we want to slam that door shut that it's never allowed during a watering ban.
I think, so maybe not laying sod, because I think that would be, but if they just laid sod and then there's a watering ban, or then maybe there would be some consideration. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think we should leave it open on the off chance that at some point in the future someone really needs sod and there's a watering ban. The city has to issue, if pending the wording, the city would have to issue the special permit. So it would be a case by case basis, just like with variances and everything else. The staff and everyone would look at it and go, "This is a situation where yes, we really, really want to put sod here for erosion control, or just what's going on with the property and where the runoff goes onto the roads and stuff."
Does that complicate things, or?
I think one of the challenges with an exemption, I think it's a nice gesture to recognize that in a very wet year, of course you can go and, if we're forecasting 70 degrees and some rain, those are good conditions. The challenge becomes who grants the exemption, and we don't want to have this situation where people feel that they can keep battling and asking for this. That's just my first reaction to that is, who's the say so? Because we certainly don't want to have to bring this to council on a per request basis, because that's not a good use of your time. And on the flip side, for staff to go and grant an exemption, we would be looking for instances on when an exemption would be appropriate. And when it becomes subjective from a staff standpoint, that becomes a little difficult to implement.
The thing that I'm thinking of is like this year, for instance, we didn't approve the permits, and yet we're getting slammed because they got the permits. And not that I want to take us out of it, although I do, but I also want to give staff, how do you say, they're the ones that are also having to issue these permits, so I don't want them to get slammed either. So I think we do have to have some clear direction.
Is there an opportunity, and this might be for both David and Sarah, an opportunity for, and it becomes a longer process, but for a variance from this section of the code? It wouldn't be quick, but it's a section of the code. If you come in here and you for any other section of the code and you can't meet a lot setback for
but they're not going to do that, because a variance is $600 just to put your application in, and then the process is usually a 2-month process. So by the time they would get the variance, it could potentially their grass is dead.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let Sarah chime in too, but I think this is more of like a performance standard.
Okay.
I don't know if this fits under the variance purview
Yeah.
as much as like
Yeah.
more of a land use setback height. I know there's some other things similar to this that Ron and I have discussed before, and I think it falls more under of a performance type standard where I'm not sure that it fits under that variance umbrella.
So let me ask this: what if somebody puts down sod and the very next week a watering restriction is put in place? Then what do? Do you say you don't get any special dispensation, or do they get special dispensation?
That's a good question. So the way my understanding of setting up the ordinance was that no new sod or new seed could be sown if there's a watering ban.
Okay.
So if up until July, well, let's see what date would we at? Well, whatever.
It's June 10th. Or
If it was
something
laid
like that.
within the compliance of the ordinance and then a watering ban went on, they would be grandfathered in, so to speak, and be allowed to irrigate because they complied with the dates, and it was
Okay.
just unfortunate circumstance that a watering ban was issued after the fact.
Okay. Kathleen, are you okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
So do we want language in there about exemptions being granted, or be silent on it?
Be silent. Let's just be silent, and then let's just say a case like Kathleen said, they have to get the sod down for whatever reason. They could always come and ask council to give them an exception. They could come under persons to be heard.
Okay.
But we don't respond to that.
Well, we give staff direction, or we put it on the next council meeting, which would be 2 weeks usually. I mean,
Well, we still have some time too, and
Yeah.
perhaps amongst staff, we could have some internal discussions on how to
okay.
best approach that. Because as I said, I think we were looking for having these set in place and communicated to the developers so that they know of this change well in advance of them ordering sod and such in the spring. So we still do have some time to do that.
Okay.
All right. And then the last one was the guidance given for irrigation for stormwater ponds and new subdivisions. I did reach out to a couple of colleagues that require this in the communities that they serve, and they indicated that they don't have anything in city code that requires it. It's just when a developer comes in, they say, use water reuse.
Medina does.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, I'll have to check back. So.
Ask Ron Beatty.
I'll ask Ron Beatty
Hold
then.
it to you.
Well, I stand corrected. Thank you. So in the interest of having something in the city code requiring that, and I can certainly go back to what Medina has, this is what I came up with for consideration. I did not include any design standards because as things change in designing these features, I didn't feel that it would be prudent to put that in city code. We would certainly look at what watershed districts require and that sort of thing for.
I think it should, though. I mean, just check with Ron.
Yeah.
And maybe Sarah can look into this too. But Medina has, I think it's an ordinance or city code. And the only reason I say it should probably be in city code is so that if a developer is looking to develop something, they usually go to our code section and see what's all required. And if it's not in there, they might say, well, I wasn't planning on that.
Sure.
We want to make sure that this is really a good thing for the city, for our water infrastructure. And the only thing I would add to this, I mean, there might be some reference to it if they need to add wells to support their system. So, but I think it needs to be in code.
Okay.
I mean, when we look at our issues currently, it's all about irrigation. So if we can remove that part from our system, that would be really good.
Okay. That's excellent direction. Thank you. I believe that's all I had for you.
Other comments? Do you agree with the irrigation part of it?
Mhm.
Okay. You're not mean, Ann. All right. With that, then that concludes this work session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Kathleen made that motion and Pam seconded that. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes.